Hello. Today's video is going to form the first in a series of lectures where we're just going to go through strength programming as a topic. Today we're just going to take a top-down view on strength programming, as in where do you begin from with an annual plan, where do you take that annual plan forward, the different kind of training blocks you can put together, how those are put together, putting together a training week, and then finally a bit of a general discussion on the training sessions themselves and how they're phased together. Okay, so first of all, before we plan out anyone's training cycle, or this lecture is going to pertain mainly to powerlifting and also to just general strength training. However, you can take out these concepts and apply them to sports training, or you can apply them to weightlifting training, or CrossFit, or any other kind of sport, really. When we look at the yearly plan, in the case of a powerlifter, or a weightlifter, or a strongman, the first thing we need to ascertain, or the first thing we need to understand is when are the competitions? Where in the year are they? How does that structure leave us with our year? How many competitions are we doing within the year? Typically, we would recommend, or I would recommend, for a powerlifter, should probably do maybe an absolute maximum of 5 competitions a year if you're a complete novice. Although I think it's better to have longer training periods to actually allow you to progress from competition to competition. So generally, would recommend 2 to 3 competitions per year. Within those competitions, you need to put together what are the important competitions, what are the ones you're peaking for, what are the ones you're going to use as a training session, which are providing qualification totals. So when you look at your annual plan, which we'll look at an annual plan in the next slide, we need to understand where that leaves the training year, where are the big gaps, where are the big gaps that allow us large training periods where we put together preparation cycles, or we can put together overload cycles. Where's the natural places for breaks like holidays, off-season training, or rest, or breaks in training. When we look at the annual plan, these things become apparent, but without the annual plan, what people end up doing is they end up following like a template, or they just end up maybe following like a week plan and never really adapting their training, or they're never really understanding where they're going to, where they're coming from. So we're going to look at an example plans from me this year. Within the plan, we'll see competition layout, we'll see the general focus of the blocks, and we'll also see an indication of the volume and the intensity cycling that I've put in place for these blocks. So here's my annual plan for the year, and we'll zoom in so you can see it a bit better. Okay, so here you'll see week commencing down the left hand side for the year. You'll see the competitions. You'll see the block with the general note of the focus of the training block. You'll see the weeks of the block, and you'll see the volume and intensity. So if we look towards the first competition of the year, which was on the weekend of the week commencing the 1st of February, you'll see we followed what's called a standard template. So for that, 3 weeks of heavy training, or 3 weeks of high volume training with a lower volume week with slightly higher intensity. This was not a focus competition. So this was what we will term going forward, or what will come across as like a volume or technique focused block. So there was no intentional peaking, there was no intentional overloading going on here. It's basically followed a 3 up, 1 down approach for volume, and for intensity started low and worked up high. So what might be termed as a bit more of a linear cycle. Coming out of this competition, the weakness that was highlighted was deadlift. So there was a 7-week deadlift focus block that followed a 7-week peaking plan. So it was 3 weeks of high intensity, or sorry, high volume, 2 weeks of moderate volume, 2 weeks of low volume, and the intensity just mirrored that training, or mirrored the volume. So when volume was high, then intensity was moderate to low. When volume is moderate, intensity is moderate, and when volume's low, then it allows intensity to be high. This ended with a peak, which ended up being a 300 kilo deadlift, which was a 10 kilo PB. Then the next block, still on a deadlift focus, but introducing the other 3 main lifts, training them with the intention of getting stronger than them. Here we start moving on to an undulating plan. So basically from week to week, week 1 volume is high, intensity is moderate. Week 2 volume is moderate, intensity is high, and they just flip flop between that for the entire training block. We follow this on into the current training block, which is just finished, and this is leading into the Scottish Classic, which is next weekend. So again, no intentional peaking block for this competition because I'm not viewing it as important. Just doing a general training template or an undulating training template, and just training to get stronger at all 3 lifts, coming off the back of a deadlift focused training period. Out of the back of the next competition, we have a longer period of training, so you'll see we have the guts of 3-4 months to prepare for the next block. So we'll go through a prep cycle, so a volume-based technique cycle. Then we'll go into an overload-based cycle, so we're looking to utilize things like rep outs, peaking within the 4-week block. We'll do another overload-based block. And then we'll go into a competition cycle, which we're going to be focused on, or I'm going to be focused on, the goal lifts for that cycle, and we're going to do a linear peak towards that. Out the back of the Classic, there's no more competitions planned, so we're just going to go into some more general periods. So we'll do another volume-based technique cycle. Off the back of that, we'll go into an overload-based cycle, and then off the back of that, we'll go into an off-season program, where we'll go into a much more general training phase where we're not just focused on the power lifts. Okay, so within that you can see how the annual plan looks, how the competition schedule and the importance of those in competitions dictates our training periods, dictates what we can do in those training periods, and you can see how it's implemented in reality for my training plan for this year. Okay, so the next thing we need to understand is when we lay out macrocycles. So when we talk about macrocycles, we talk about periods of training that last for anywhere from 3 months up to 4 years, which is an Olympic cycle. A macrocycle is a long planned period of training. If you look at any of Verschonsky's work or any of the typical block periodization work, you'll show that by training a certain physical attribute, such as a volume-based approach or what is called a hypertrophy block, typically, or a work capacity block, we can then positively influence the strength focus block, which then can positively influence a max strength focus block, or we can go on forward and carry that through the power-based, or that's more of a sports-based training paradigm, where we look to take very general adaptations such as hypertrophy, turn them into a more general adaptation such as strength, and then try to turn that into specific adaptations to sport such as specific muscular power in relevant movement patterns that are relevant for that sport. For example, within rugby, taking something like hypertrophy of the glutes and lower back, turning that into force production in the hip joint, and then turning that force production into specific force production or specific adaptation towards scrumming might be an example of a block-based approach. Within powerlifting, max strength is where we're going, so we don't really need to worry about the specific adaptation as per se, as in pretty much all the training that we do is specific to the sport. What is not specific to the sport within powerlifting is the use of higher work capacity phases, hypertrophy phases, periods of very high volume or high variance in training. This is typically what we will do in the off season. We'll discuss that later on. So a general structure that you might utilize in a 3-month or a 3-block macrocycle might be a volume and technique focused training block. So this can be focused on lift variance, pause squats, tempo squats, box squats, band squats, variations that are designed or chosen specifically to help you with certain technique or training issues that you have. They could also just be purely like we mentioned before, like a work capacity or a hypertrophy based phase. This is just a very high high volume training period, moving into an overload training period. So this can be something where we utilize like an accumulation, so like a 3-week accumulation followed by a 3-week peak, or we can utilize open-ended sets such as rep-out sets, AMRAP sets, utilize a linear phases of training like 3-week linear cycles, and then followed by a 3-week linear cycle added with chains or bands. Basically, we're intentionally overloading, so we're trying to reach an overreach state, whether that's through intensity manipulation, volume manipulation, exercise variation, however that's achieved. The goal is to overreach the lifter. And then this is going to be followed by a recuperation or a peaking phase. So a recuperation phase, we'd probably go back to a lower volume technique focused training block, or we might come out into a peaking phase where we're building towards a competition or building towards a testing day. Okay, so just the discussion of some of the different blocks that we have discussed. So a volume-based or technique block, this is typically, I would recommend this for a beginner or intermediate lifter. This means the bulk of the training should be consisted of this. So if you're a beginner lifter or you're an intermediate lifter, the vast majority of your training, even if with competitions coming up, unless it's a very important competition for that lifter, the focus should always be on quality of movement, getting in a good volume of movement, and utilizing variations of those movements that are going to help to address that lifter's technique blockages or their technique problems. We're looking for a moderate to high volume, so that means 300 to 600 total lifts per week. So that could be like 100 bench presses, 100 squats, 100 deadlifts, or up to 200 squats, 200 benches, 200 deadlifts. And since intensity is 50 to 85%, so we're never really going into top end, the vast majority of the lifting is probably going to be done from 50 to 70%. For variation, say that 2/3 of the time is going to be spent focused on straight up barbell lifts. So a straight up barbell lift can be a squat, a pause squat, a tempo squat, anything that involves a lifter moving through the full range of movement. And we can change the tempo, we can add in pauses, we can change or we can vary different things within the lift itself. However, it's just a full range of movement lift done to the rules of the federation that you compete in. And then 30% of the focus on adaptation lifts or assistance work. So when we talk about adaptation lifts, we talk about things like band squats, box squats, chain squats. Of course, these can be put across the bench press and deadlift. We could talk about things like safety squat bar, cambered bar, buffalo bar, football bar for bench press, trap bar for deadlift. And then assistance work is general muscular work. We utilize dumbbells, kettlebells, machines, and anything that we're using to either bring up a lagging body part, so if we reckon that we're weak in the lockout, then hypertrophy work or general work that we might perform for that body part to potentiate the strength work. That's we're going to call that assistance work, and that should make up roughly about 1/3 of our training. Block lengths from 3 to 6 weeks in length. And then what we do is just fluctuate in volume and intensity week to week. that's assigned, but it's in a non-systematic manner. So that means that we don't follow like a 3-week build-up and then a deload systematically week in, week out, because that's going to lead to stagnation. What we do is we like have a high volume week. Could be week 1 in the first 4-week block, then week 2 in the next block, then week 4 in the next block. We could have 2 high volume blocks. We can have, basically it undulates intensity and volume week to week. And it's not done systematically. It's done a bit more chaotic because it gives the lifter a bit more of an experiential base, and it lets them adapt in a slow and steady manner. We're not getting to the point where we're like peaking their condition. We're always just training capacity. We're never really looking to peak that person. So the lifter within this kind of volume technique based training method or these training blocks may never actually know how strong they are as they train. They will get stronger and their poundages will go up very slowly. However, if this is done correctly, they're never really going to know where their limit lies, because it should be done in a slow manner and just brought up with time. Overload blocks, these are like shock blocks, or these are deliberately designed to bring a lifter to like a peak or an overreach state. So popular blocks that provide this sort of function with something like the Russian squat routine, something like Smolov. These are volume-based overload blocks. They should be used by intermediate or advanced lifters during long down periods. So anywhere you've got 3 to 4 months with no competition, you should be utilizing a block or an overload block or 2 in there. Frequency from 1 to 4 times per the lift. Intensity 60 to 100%. Volume low to high, so anywhere from 50 to 600 lifts per week. The low volume means that we're using a very taxing protocol 1 day a week. So it could be something like going for rep PBs on squat 1 week, rep PBs on deadlift the next week, and flip-flopping that over the block. Maybe going for like a 10 RM PB week 1 to 2, 8 RM week 2 to 3. Something where we're constantly in a state of overreach, but we're flip-flopping the lifts, and we have a very low lifting volume for that. But we're trying to push ourselves maximally week to week with the understanding that this approach is going to fall down maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks into it. Variation, we typically you're going to utilize, there's going to be a highly focused training period. So 80% focus on barbell lifts or barbell lift variants, and then 20% focus on adaptation lifts. Not really, this is not a huge period for assistance work. We're mainly focused on pushing the main lifts or important lifts to close to breaking point, and then we're going to pull back on it. These blocks can last from 5 to 9 weeks. And typically they're linear blocks designed towards a peak, or they're an undulating block designed with an open-ended element such as a rep out or an AMRAP, or we're just looking for PBs. Then we have competition or peaking blocks. These are what we use in the build-up to an important competition. They'll have a frequency of 2 to 4 times per week per lift. Intensity from 50 to 100%. Volume is going to be moderate to high. Variation, we're really focused on the barbell lifts here, and then 10% can be focused on adaptation lifts. We're not too worried about the assistance work. We can put it in for some lifters, but it's not going to be a high period of assistance work. It's a period where we're going to spend the vast majority of our time on competition lifts or variants of competition lifts that are specifically targeted towards problems that lifter may have within a competition setting. Block lengths 4 to 6 weeks. No longer than that, and they're always linear blocks designed towards a peak and a focused set target. So if we know for this week or this meet we're going for a 220 squat, 130 bench, and 260 deadlift, then all of the training is targeted towards that. There is no open-ended content within these blocks. It's controlled training. We know from week 1 to 6, session 1 to 36, we know exactly the percentage that's being lifted, the kilos that are being lifted, and the conditions that those are going to be lifted under. And we always make sure to manage fatigue within a personalized context. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but we manage fatigue for that lifter from 2 weeks out to the comp, so they're coming in. We know they're coming in technically as proficient as we can get them in those 6 weeks, but also with in as little a fatigue state where we've dropped fatigue down to a level where fitness is peaked, so we know come meet day, you're going to feel great in the platform. And then the off-season, or the general sort of block, this is used to work on problem areas typically, or to take a break from training. So for a powerlifter, this might be when you go over to only specialty bars, or you move away from barbell training entirely. Maybe you go take up CrossFit, or you go take up strongman, or just get out the gym for a period. Frequency, 1 to 2 times per week. Want a high level of variance within this training block. Intensity 50 to 80%. We're not really looking to reach any kind of overreach state, certainly within a strength context. Volume, low to moderate. Variance, we want a 40% focus on barbell lifts, even less in some scenarios, and a 60% focus on adaptation assistance lifting. Block length anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. And what we follow, or the planning model that we want to follow on this block, it's got to be either an undulating or just a non-descriptive block. So we might say squat 5 sets of 5, or safety squat set of 12, set of 10, set of 8, set of 6. But we're not going to prescribe the loads or the percentages. We're just going to let the lifter crack on. And we're going to look to stimulate adaptation areas other than max strength. So we're going to look at hypertrophy. We might look at fitness, we might look at power, we might look at speed, we might look at movement capabilities, movement capacities. We're just going to take a time away from the sport. So powerlifting, we're going to move away from powerlifting training and maybe look at training within the context of powerlifting, but using different bars, different training schedules. We're basically switch it up for 4 to 6 weeks. One to act as a break for the lifter. 2 to allow niggles and injuries to heal. 3 to give, related to number 2, we're going to allow tissue some time to kind of detrain a bit and recover a bit. And we're going to utilize this to make training a little bit more fun, but also to work on some things such as work capacity or fitness or general physiological capacities that are going to let us push on in the next year's training. Okay, so pulling together the block, here's 4 different kinds of block variants you can put together based off like a 4-week block. The first one's a linear block. So linear gets misinterpreted. People often think of linear as just we follow this 10-week peaking plan. Although a peaking plan is linear, it's not necessarily like a 24-week peaking plan. It could just be like a cyclable block. So this is a 4-week linear block that can be used cyclically. 5 sets of 5, 75%. Week 1, week 2, 5 sets of 4, 80%. Week 3, 5 sets of 3, 85%. Week 4, 4 sets of 2, 9%. Reset, go again, maybe add some weight. This can be done once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week. When you up the frequency, just play with the volume and play with the intensities to reflect the increase in frequency. An undulating block. So this is high volume, low intensity, moderate volume, moderately high intensity, moderately high volume, moderate intensity, low volume, high intensity. And that what that looks like is 6 sets of 6 at 70%, 5 sets of 3 at 85%, week 2, week 3, 5 by 5 at 75%, week 4, 5 by 2 at 9%. This is a bit more of a it's still kind of linear in the way it's set out, as we're starting off with the lowest percentage, we're ending with the highest percentage, but we're, rather than just following like a 4-week step, we're undulating between volume and intensity over 4 weeks. So low, if you were to draw an arrow over the 4 weeks, the general trend would be volume down, intensity up, although that would be a wavy line instead of a straight line for both adaptations. This kind of training is probably better for intermediate to advanced lifters who want to train towards a system, but don't maybe have competition. So if you like a general strength training block, this is probably a good block for that. Volume-based blocks, so it's more like the Macrocycle kind of training, where everything's based off total lifts in the week and average intensity. So here we have the overload week is week 1 and 3. And the recovery week is week 4. And you have a moderate week 2. So first week 600 lifts at an average intensity of 62%. So within that average intensity, it can be anywhere from 50 to 100%. And the 600 lifts totals is 600 power lifts within the week. So 600 squat, benches, and deadlifts. So that could be 200 squats, 200 benches, 200 deadlifts, or skewed in another manner. Typically, bench press will be higher, and squat and deadlift will be similar within their volume spread. You get 400 lifts with an average intensity of 73%. So it's like a moderate week. And then the next overload week, 700 lifts at 65% intensity. And then you have your recovery weeks, 300 lifts at 77%. Within this volume-based block model, or this kind of Macrocycle-inspired model, variance is key. So in this block we have week 1, week 3. That's where the overload lies. Within that context, we don't want to repeat that next block. We want to change it. So we might want to go week 2 as an overload, week 1 and 3 as moderate, and week 3 as recovery. It's just how you stack the deck. And you stack the deck differently month to month. And this is so if the first block, or the linear block, that presents a steep upward curve for intensity and a steep downward curve for volume. This kind of training has a very wavy line. So intensity and volume go up and down week to week, and in a sporadic manner, or more sporadic or more random manner, but the general trend is still up, although it's it's not as steep a trend. You'll typically find within this kind of training, unless you do a max out, or you do a meet, or you do a testing block, it's very difficult to know where you are, because you'll always be training under the mask of fatigue, or you'll be training with sub-maximal weights, so you'll never really understand where your true capabilities lie, or where they lie. This type of training definitely works though, so there's nothing to be scared about. Some lifters or some people will battle with it mentally. And then finally, you get a template within belt variance or regulations, so something like West Side, where the maximum effort day is ever present. However, you vary the methods in which it's done to kind of get away from overload or stagnation. So you can have like 3 or 4 different squat variations, say. It's cambered bar cambered bar squat to box, cambered bar squat to box against band, box squat against change, and then just regular squat all done to max effort on a 4-week rotation. Or something like the cube, where it's a 3-week template, and it'll either be based on speed, volume, or maximum effort, and the 3 lists will take a different skew from a week to week basis. So within that, there's the 4 planning is reasonably open-ended, and the week plan or the month plan is set up in such a way that the lifter can run that concurrently, normally for very long periods of time, and quite often successfully as well. Finally, next, putting together the training week. So we can look at a lift focus split. So typically this is the most common powerlifting split. Monday squat day, Tuesday bench day, Wednesday off, Thursday assistance day, so it could be like a close grip focus, Friday deadlift, Saturday assistance, Sunday off. That's your most common split. Then total body split, Monday squat heavy, bench volume, deadlift volume, Wednesday squat speed, bench heavy, deadlift speed, Friday deadlift heavy, bench speed, squat volume. This is quite a good intermediate split, something I would recommend for intermediate lifter. And you can follow this with a 4-week template, such as an undulating template, or you can follow a linear template. Frequency of 3 is quite a good split for intermediate lifters. Upper lower split, adapted from bodybuilding. Monday squat and deadlift, Tuesday bench, Wednesday off, Thursday squat and deadlift, Friday bench, Saturday, Sunday off. And typically you'll do your assistance work within here as well. So could be, for example, competition squat, deficit deadlift with leg press, leg extension. Tuesday could be bench press and back. Thursday could be squat against bands, competition deadlift with posterior chain work, stuff like it, deadlifts, glute ham raise, stuff like that. Friday could be close grip bench press, board bench press, band bench press, chain bench press, with like bodybuilding work for the shoulders and triceps. And Saturday, Sunday off. And then you get something like a high frequency split, which you can train squat, bench, deadlift up to 6 to 7 times a week. But you need to box smart with this kind of training. You can't be. It's very easy to accumulate fatigue when you're doing the lifts every day. So you'll see great results for a period of time. But if you adopt this method without foresight, without foreplanning, you're almost guaranteed to get into an overreached state, and eventually overuse injury will occur, almost guaranteed, if it's not done intelligently. Then finally, pulling the session together. The most important exercises always come first. So if the focus for the day is squat, that's the first thing you're going to do. Second and third place. So you probably have like 3 exercises within the day's training. They're going to be performed with good intensity before the person gets too tired. This could maybe be dragged up to 4 or 6 exercises in a training day if you do an AM/PM split. And this should come in order of importance. So if the session is squat, bench, and deadlift, if squat is the focus of the training, that's going to come first, and then bench press, and then deadlift. Allocate the rest where appropriate. So if we're working on hypertrophy or we're working on work capacity, shorter rest periods are generally good. So anywhere from 60 to 120 seconds. If we're working on strength and hypertrophy, so we're doing something like a high volume training, we're 6 sets of 6, then 2 to 3 minutes is appropriate. Or if we're just trying to work on shift and load or training with heavy loads in the session, then we're really looking just to take the rest as much as possible. So 3 to 5 minutes or longer, depending on the lifter. Where possible, always alternate upper and lower training. So if we're doing a full body session, it's great to do like a lower body exercise, upper body exercise, lower body exercise, upper body exercise. It just lets the muscles of the lower and upper body recuperate as you're still training. Assistance should always be based on need and chosen intelligently, and should normally come last in the session. So when we say based on need, if lockout's a problem in your bench press, then your assistance work should be focused on hypertrophy of the triceps and shoulders and back to a lesser extent. Muscles involved in locking the bench out, because that's going to potentiate your specific training, such as board pressing, close grip pressing, chain bench pressing. So that the hypertrophy training is going to potentiate your specific problem solving training or your problem based variant training, which then eventually is just going to go into your competition lift. And then finally, remember that you should program your primary focus and assistance differently. So primary focus training should be 80% of the time or 90% of the time focused on strength, and your assistance trainings should 80 to 90% of the time be focused on hypertrophy. Getting stronger in a dumbbell bench press, unless you're a novice, is not really going to carry over to barbell bench pressing. Whereas the hypertrophy from that dumbbell bench pressing can be utilized within the specific context of barbell bench press training, which will definitely result in a better bench press. Okay, that concludes this talk. Hope you found it useful. What we'll do in this series, we'll just kind of delve into more specifically some of the topics that we've covered. We'll look at putting together different kind of blocks. So putting together like an actual undulating block, putting together a linear block, why we put it together that way, so on and so forth. Hopefully you've enjoyed this lecture. If you'd like to learn more or you'd like to get in touch, please shoot me an email, speedpowerperformance@gmail.com. Please visit onlinestrengthcoach.com for online strength coach training, or if you want more of this kind of content. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Mark, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.